I've done franchise histories before. What I want to do is something a little different. I want to get into just the trade histories of teams. And this will allow for more trades to be in there and discussions of this. And I'm doing reverse alphabetical. So I started with alphabetical on the low points for teams. We're going reverse alphabetical for trade histories. And we'll see how this all turns out. And if I can get everything onto one board for a team, I will. And if I can't, I can't. Now, when I say everything, I mean key trades. Not every single trade that a team's made. I'm not getting to general managers and their histories because that's more for general manager videos. And I am leaning towards doing more general manager videos as this goes on for however long it goes. And start putting general manager videos together again. So those are on the way. And with that, I might just go through the entire league, start with maybe one division, and go through every team in that division and just go that way and look at, free agents and drafts and all that other stuff that general managers do. Now, for the Winnipeg Jets, I have to start with the Thrashers. And the Thrashers, a lot of the mismanaged trades that get made help to allow the Thrashers to end up in Winnipeg. There was some incompetence surrounding the Atlanta Thrashers throughout a lot of their existence. Now, their first trade, June 25th, 1999, they acquired the number 1 draft pick from the Vancouver Canucks, who had acquired it previously, in exchange for number 2, which became Daniel Sedin, and a 2000 third-round draft pick as well. Now, of course, that number 1 draft pick became Patrick Stefan. So, if they drafted Sedin instead of Stefan, who knows how things would have turned out. Does Daniel Sedin end up hitting in the NHL? Does he play a couple years in Atlanta? And keep in mind, the Sedins, even together, struggled the first few years they were in the NHL. It's possible the Sedins separated, may not have worked at all, and they may have ended up going back to Sweden. Their careers could have ended up completely different. March 13th, 2000, they acquired Donald Audette and František Kaberle, to going back to the LA Kings, Kelly Buchberger, and Nelson Emerson. So that's one of those where we're making a trade out here to try to turn things around a little bit at least, but Atlanta had a rough year their first season. March 18th, 2002, they acquire a 4th-round pick in that 02 draft for Ray Ferraro, going to the St. Louis Blues. Ray Ferraro had been an Atlanta Thrasher for a bit. June 22nd, 2002, Slava Kozlov and a 2nd-round draft pick in that draft became Joachim Lindstrom, was picked up in exchange for a 2002 second and a 3rd that went back to the Buffalo Sabres. So Slava Kozlov goes to Buffalo. It doesn't work out there. He goes to Atlanta and he experiences a renaissance. This is a positive deal for the Atlanta Thrashers. July 30th, 2005, they acquire a 2005 first as well as a 2nd, which became Andrei Pavlik. Going the other way, a 1st-round pick to the New York Rangers, which became Mark Stahl. And of course, with that 1st-round pick, they drafted Bure, and Bure never ended up playing a game in the NHL. And so, I will say too, I agree with, there was a comment on the video where I was talking about that with the 2005 redraft. Somebody said I used to pick up Bure in the EA Sports NHL games. Yeah, me too. He did end up coming a pretty decent NHL player, and he didn't cost a whole lot of money to re-sign either. So you're not the only one who was picking up Bure every time that you'd start a new file. Now, August 23rd, 2005, Greg DeVries and Marian Hossa were acquired from the Ottawa Senators in exchange for Danny Heatley. This was a trade that kind of sort of worked for both. Heatley went on and played really well in Ottawa. And Hossa, well, he played well in Atlanta until they were forced to trade him out. And DeVries wasn't a bad throw-in either. Now, February 25th, 2007, they acquire Keith Tkachuk from the Blues. This was when they had it in their heads, okay, we're going for it. We're going to make the playoffs. We're going to go for it. We got to do something. Because remember, they came into the league in 99. This is 2007. And you got Kovalchuk there. You got to make sure you're keeping him happy. They traded Glenn Metropolit, a 2008 second, a 2007 first, which became Michael Backlund, and a 2007 third going to St. Louis. Now, of course, Backlund was not a draft pick of the Blues. That draft pick ends up going to Calgary, but still, it was an expensive price they paid for Keith Tkachuk, and it was a pure rental. He went back to St. Louis after, and the NHL wasn't a huge fan of how that trade went down. It wasn't against the rules, but they didn't like the idea of renting out a guy at the deadline that you know you're going to get back after the season's done. February 26, 2008, this is one of those trades that defines the Atlanta Thrashers ending up in Winnipeg. Colby Armstrong, Angelo Esposito, Eric Christensen, and a 2008 first were acquired from Pittsburgh in exchange for Pascal Dupuis and Marian Hossa going to the Penguins. Now, Hossa would go on to go to the Stanley Cup Finals that year, and then he would end up moving on to Detroit. But Hossa, while he was a rental for Pittsburgh, and you can look and say, well, they got 4 assets, I don't know that those 4 assets are necessarily better than trying to find some way to keep Hossa, trying to find some way to keep this together, because this was less than a year removed from them going for it in 2007, and it just didn't quite work out. February 4th, 2010. This is the trade that ends up really kind of leading towards this team leaving for Winnipeg. And again, you know, they lost. They had no building to play in for the season that they ended up in Winnipeg. I know they'd had a building previously, and that building's still there. They didn't have the rights to play there. Nicholas Bergfors, Patrice Cormier, Johnny Oduya, a 2010 first, which became Kevin Hayes, and a 2010 second were acquired from New Jersey in exchange for Ilya Kovalchuk, Anssi Salmela, and a 2010 second, which became John Merrill, currently of the Vegas Golden Knights. So New Jersey picks up Kovalchuk. It just pulls the heart out of the offense for the Atlanta Thrashers. And again, Atlanta's picking up a ton of assets for a few players going the other way, but it's the players that are going the other way that's the problem. They're losing that star power. They're losing that offense. June 23rd, 2010. And they kind of did the opposite here. So Chicago Blackhawks, whoops, with their paperwork, and so they're not able to keep everybody because their restricted free agents didn't get all their paperwork in time. Akeem Aliu is acquired along with Dustin Byfuglien, Ben Eager, and Brent Sopel from Chicago in exchange for Joey Crabb, Jeremy Morin, who was considered to be a really solid forward on his way up, Marty Reasoner, a 2010 first, which became Kevin Hayes. So that was the pick they had picked up in the Ilya Kovalchuk deal, and a 2010 second. So this is one where you can argue, you know what? Atlanta did pretty well picking up Dustin Byfuglien. That wasn't a bad pickup for them. And so the Atlanta Thrashers probably win that trade. I'm going to go ahead and say, I'm going to go out on a limb and say they win that trade, even though that's a first rounder that becomes Kevin Hayes, who right now is playing, well, before the pause was playing pretty well for Philadelphia, but he wasn't going to stay with Atlanta anyways. And then oddly enough, he ends up being a Jet at a later time. Now, February 28th, 2011, this is the last trade this organization makes before they become the Winnipeg Jets. They acquire Radek Dvorak and a 2011 fifth, which became Sean Corrali, and going to Florida was Nicholas Bergfors and Patrick Rissmiller. So Bergfors, one of the centerpieces of what they got back for Ilya Kovalchuk, and it just doesn't last. So that finishes out the Atlanta portion of things. Now, what's interesting is as we get into Winnipeg, there's less trades being made. And this has been a reality in the NHL over the last, I want to say 3 or 4 years, where there's been less impactful deals being made than in previous years. So, and again, people will point to this year's trade deadline. Oh, there were tons of trades, but how many of them weren't rentals? How many of them were actually trades that you look at and say, this changes things in the NHL fundamentally? This is a huge deal, and there's really not that many. June 25th, 2011, the first trade that the Winnipeg Jets made as the Winnipeg Jets after no longer being Atlanta. 2011 4th round pick, and then going to San Jose was a 5th round pick, which became Sean Corrali, and a 7th, which became Colin Blackwell. So, yeah, that's a trade that Winnipeg loses, even though they're moving up in the draft. February 11th, 2015, so almost 4 years in between the bigger trades. Brendan Lemieux, Yoel Armia, Drew Stafford, Tyler Myers, and a 2015 first, which became Jack Roslovic, are traded to Winnipeg in return for Jason Kasdorf, Zach Bogosian, and Evander Kane going to Buffalo. I love this deal for Winnipeg. Whether it's Lemieux, Armia, I liked Stafford at the time. Myers had a good run with Winnipeg, and Roslovic is still making improvements, it would seem, every season he's playing. So, really solid deal. Yes, Evander Kane, played in Buffalo for a while. He's in San Jose, and he can be counted on for 30 goals a year. But it was seen that he was not the most popular guy in Winnipeg, and it was time for him to move on. And, of course, Bogosian, there's always been injury problems. So, I like the deal for Winnipeg. June 21st, 2017, they acquire a first-round pick from Vegas, which became Christian Vesalainen. Going the other way to Vegas was Nick Suzuki as a first-round pick. and a third-round pick in 2019. Now, what's interesting is this is Winnipeg trading down. This is one of those expansion draft type deals. Like, okay, so we'll give you this pick and we'll move down, and you're going to take this guy and all of that wonderful stuff. Suzuki, though, you have to think, what would Nick Suzuki have looked like in a Winnipeg jersey? How good could he have been? And not only that, but if they draft in that spot, would Winnipeg have taken Suzuki? Or was Vesalainen the guy that they wanted to take the whole time? And if Vesalainen doesn't become a solid everyday NHLer, does this trade become one of the more lopsided against the Winnipeg Jets in their brief re-existence, as it were? February 26th, 2018, as this team looks for a top-notch second-line center, and that's always been what they've been looking for. They acquired Paul Stastny. From the Blues. Going the other way was Eric Foley and a 2018 first, which was traded to Toronto, which became Rasmus Sandin. So again, Stastny didn't stick around, and that would seem to be an issue for them. Now, the other issue that ends up coming up here, as I grab ones here that I didn't have the actual team name up for, and we'll do that, and we'll do that. All right. Simone Bourque is picked up from Montreal in exchange for Yoel Armia, Steve Mason, a 2019 7th and a 2020 4th. The reason this deal's made, Steve Mason cap reasons, Montreal can buy him out. The price paid is Yoel Armia. Armia is a very solid forward for the Montreal Canadiens, and so this is a trade that's won by Montreal in my mind. Even though, yes, they were looking to get rid of Mason's contract. Armia turns out to be kind of an expensive price to pay, although Winnipeg's a team that does have a lot of forwards. Now, February 25th, 2019, they acquired Nathan Beaulieu in exchange for a 6th rounder to Buffalo, which was, I believe, just a pure pure rental situation, and then, of course, he stayed in Winnipeg. So, yeah, Beaulieu has been decent for Winnipeg, top 6 at the very least. And then February 25th, 2019, this is the one people didn't like. Kevin Hayes acquired in exchange for Brendan Lemieux and a 2019 first. Pretty uniformly at the time, people thought Winnipeg might be overpaying a little bit for Hayes. It didn't quite work out with Hayes. And the problem, too, is that you have Stastny February 26, 2018, Hayes February 25th, 2019, and you're giving up first-round draft picks for both. And the idea being, okay, we want to win the Stanley Cup. We think that this will get us there. This is that second center we've needed. And there was some concern this year, myself included, that maybe Winnipeg was going to do it again this year, where they would trade a first-round draft pick in exchange for that fix down the middle, which they thankfully didn't do. But the Hayes trade, I don't think there's any way to slice it that it isn't a loss. But June 17th, 2019, Kevin Cheveldayoff kind of makes it up to the fans where he grabs Neil Pionk. He takes back that 2019 first that they had traded to the Rangers, drafts Heinola. Heinola looks like he's going to be a good defenseman at the NHL level, and gives up Jacob Trouba to the New York Rangers. And Trouba, of course, wasn't interested in staying in Winnipeg. That was a relationship that just was not working out on any level. So Trouba for Pionk and a first. I like that deal for Winnipeg. I like that it saved them on cap space. They get that first-round draft pick back, and it makes it basically Trouba and Lemieux in exchange for Kevin Hayes and Pionk. And that first-round draft pick just goes back and forth, so that first-round draft pick is a wash. Now, I still think Brendan Lemieux has more upside than he's shown offensively, but, you know, it's not a huge loss for them overall compared to what it was at the time, especially of that first trade, where I thought that was a bit of a mistake for Winnipeg, but I understood why they were doing it. So there you go, the trade history of the Thrashers and the Jets. And again, I'm going in reverse alphabetical, so look for Washington next up in this, and then we can take a look at Vegas, Vancouver, all that other wonderful stuff. Do stay tuned, do tune in, and hey, thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. And again, I'm not doing every single trade the franchise has made. I'm just trying to go to the ones that I think made a difference and maybe keyed a team up or keyed them down, where maybe they shouldn't have made the move they did, or maybe they made a really smart move that at the time we might have been shrugging our shoulders about. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts, as always. Remember, stay home where you can. Stay as safe as possible right now during and amidst all of this. And hey, thanks guys for all your support. It means a lot. I will talk to you again soon.